My own grandchildren called me outdated and old-fashioned. The phrase echoed in my mind, sharper than any blade, as I watched the scene unfold in the living room of my Vermont home. It was Thanksgiving Day, a holiday we always celebrated with family gathered, but this year, the atmosphere was charged with a tension that not even the smell of roasted turkey could disguise. My granddaughter, Sarah, in her 20s, with her pink-dyed hair and a condescending smile, had just dismissed my advice about selling the old family land. Grandma Eleanor, with all due respect, you don't understand modern investments. That's old-school stuff, you know. We need liquidity for our new tech venture. Beside her, my grandson, David, an ambitious 30-year-old, nodded vigorously, his eyes fixed on his laptop screen, where colorful graphs promised quick fortunes. Yeah, Grandma, you're a bit outdated. Rural real estate isn't what it used to be. I felt diminished, my experience scorned, my heart broken. The humiliation was a suffocating weight, a cold blanket that enveloped me, even with the crackling fireplace in the background. I, Eleanor Vance, the 75-year-old matriarch, who built this house with my late husband John's own hands, and who kept this family together through generations of harsh winters and hard-working summers. My voice, which once commanded respect, was now just an ignored whisper amidst the buzz of grand plans and youthful disregard. They didn't know, or perhaps they had forgotten, that every inch of this land, every brick of this house, held more than memories. It held an ancestral secret, a dark truth that the Vance family had desperately tried to hide for centuries. A secret that, if revealed, could open an abyss beneath their feet. If you've ever felt the pain of being undervalued by those you love most, please like and subscribe to the channel to follow this story of justice and redemption. I wasn't just an outdated grandma. My life was a tapestry of resilience and wisdom, woven with the threads of the generations before me. I grew up on a farm, learning from my father, a man of few words but deep connection to the land, that every tree, every stream, every stone had a story. I married John Young, a strong and gentle man, and together we transformed this property, which we inherited from the Vances, into a prosperous home. As my children grew, I taught them the value of hard work, honesty, and above all, respect for their roots. But over time, modernity brought a blindness. My children, and now my grandchildren, seemed to see only the monetary value of everything, forgetting the essence. The land they wanted to sell, for example, was not just a piece of property. It was the shadow grove, as my great-grandfather called it, a place where, according to family legends, an ancient pact had been sealed, protecting the Vances in exchange for an oath never to disturb what lay buried there. I had warned them. Be careful with the shadow grove, my dears. There are things there that should not be stirred. Easy money can bring heavy consequences. But they laughed. Grandma, that's old superstition. It's 2024. Nobody believes in ghost stories anymore. My daughter, Susan, Sarah, and David's mother tried to calm me. Mom, they just want the best for the family. Modernize, you know. We can't be stuck in the past. But I knew it wasn't about modernizing. It was about greed, about the incessant search for more, without considering the cost. That land, the heart of our property, was the guardian of the secret. And now, they were about to violate it. My pain, the pain of seeing my family disrespect everything I stood for, everything my ancestors had protected, began to solidify into an unwavering resolve. My hurt transformed into a cold, calculated revenge. It wouldn't be a revenge of shouts or confrontations, but one that the family's own history would take charge of executing. I had kept the secret for decades, honoring my ancestors' promise. But if they were willing to break that chain, then the secret would no longer be my burden alone. That night, as the family slept, I went to the attic, a place no one had visited for years. Under a pile of dusty blankets and old Christmas boxes, I found the cedar chest that belonged to my great-grandmother, Eleanor Vance. Inside, there were no jewels or money, but yellowed parchments, a leather-bound diary, and a dark silver locket. The diary, handwritten in elegant script, told the true story of the Shadow Grove and the pact, the story they had dismissed as superstition. As I read the last pages, a shiver ran down my spine. Great-grandmother Alara had written about the terrible consequences for those who dared to break the oath, about the abyss that would open, and more importantly, she had detailed how to activate the final protection, should the pact be violated. What was buried would finally reap their souls, and I, Eleanor Vance, the outdated one, would be the only witness. Dawn would bring not only the beginning of the excavations, but also the beginning of a revelation that would change everything forever. Dawn arrived, painting the Vermont sky with shades of pink and orange. But for me, Eleanor, the light seemed darker than usual. From my kitchen window, with a steaming cup of coffee in my hands, I watched the arrival of heavy machinery. Excavators, tractors, trucks, a fleet of metal and noise that looked like an army invading a sanctuary. The Innovate Estates team, led by a young engineer from Boston with an overly confident smile, unloaded equipment with the cold efficiency of someone who saw the land as nothing more than a resource to be exploited. David and Sarah were there, of course, overseeing everything with the excitement of children in a candy store. "Grandma, come see, it's impressive," David shouted, waving at me. His enthusiasm was palpable, but I saw only blindness. I walked down to them, feeling the cold morning air and the smell of diesel mixed with the damp aroma of the forest. "Are you sure you want to do this?" I asked, my voice low, almost a whisper against the roar of the engines that were starting to warm up. Sarah rolled her eyes, impatient. "Grandma, we've talked about this. There's nothing here but old trees and silly legends. We need to progress." The engineer, a man named Mark, approached, extending his hand. "Mrs. Vance, it's a pleasure. Don't worry, our team is highly qualified. We'll do a clean and efficient job." I shook his hand, feeling the calluses of my own working life, and saw the difference between us. He saw a project, I saw a living being. The first excavator advanced towards the Shadow Grove, its metal claws tearing into the earth with a violence that made me shiver. The sound of the first tree falling echoed like a scream in the forest, a sound that seemed to rip not only wood, but also the fabric of time and history. David and Sarah applauded, oblivious to my anguish. But then something happened. The excavator, which moments before had been operating with brute force, sputtered. The engine coughed, emitted thick black smoke, and stopped abruptly. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the hiss of the smoke and the distant song of a bird. Mark, the engineer, frowned. "Mechanical problem. It happens." But there was a hint of uncertainty in his voice. As the mechanics rushed to check the machine, a cold, sudden wind swept through the area, rustling the leaves of the remaining trees in the Shadow Grove with an unusual fury for an autumn morning. A dry but sturdy branch broke off an ancient tree and fell with a dull thud, inches from where Sarah stood. She jumped, her face pale. "Wow, that was close." David laughed nervously. "Grandma's right, Sarah. The grove is protesting." But his laughter didn't reach his eyes. I just watched, feeling the weight of great-grandmother Alara's diary in my mind. The pact had been broken. The Shadow Grove had awakened. And this was just the beginning. The mechanical problems multiplied in the following days. A second excavator had its hydraulic system inexplicably compromised, spilling oil onto the newly opened ground. A transport truck, loaded with felled tree trunks, lost control on a flat road and almost overturned, with the driver unable to explain what had happened. The Innovate Estates team, initially confident, began to show signs of nervousness. Mark, the engineer, spent hours on the phone, his voice increasingly tense. "I've never seen anything like it," I once heard him say, as I watered my flowers in the garden, pretending not to pay attention. It seems the place doesn't want to be touched. David and Sarah, however, persisted in their denial. "It's just a series of unfortunate coincidences," David argued during dinner, as he tried to fix his laptop, which had mysteriously stopped working. "Technology fails, Grandma. It's nothing supernatural." Sarah, with a deep scratch on her arm that she swore was caused by a treacherous branch while walking through the grove, agreed. "We need to be faster. Maybe the grove is just resisting change." They used the word resisting with a mocking tone, but I could see the hint of fear in their eyes. That night, as the rain gently tapped on the window, I reread the pages of great-grandmother Alara's diary. She described similar incidents, small signs of the grove's displeasure when the original settlers tried to clear the area. "The grove has its own will," Alara had written in a firm hand. "It protects what is buried, and those who dare to challenge it will feel its fury in subtle ways before the true darkness is revealed." She spoke of strange illnesses that afflicted the animals grazing near the grove, of disturbing dreams that haunted those who slept nearby, and of unexplained losses that affected the crops. The next day, the news spread through the small Vermont community. The neighbor's cattle, Mr. Henderson's, grazing in a field adjacent to the shadow grove, had mysteriously fallen ill. Several animals died overnight, with no veterinary explanation. "It's a plague," said Mr. Henderson, his face etched with worry as he spoke to my daughter Susan. "I've never seen anything like it in all my years farming." Susan, who was always more skeptical, tried to find a logical explanation, but the anxiety in her voice was evident. David and Sarah, upon hearing the news, fell silent. The mockery on their faces had been replaced by a subtle pallor. The seeds of doubt had been planted. The whisper of the past was becoming a chorus, and I knew that Alara's true darkness was about to manifest. The atmosphere on the Vance farm became dense, charged with growing apprehension. The incidents were no longer isolated. They formed a disturbing pattern. The Innovate Estates workers began to refuse to enter the shadow grove, claiming strange feelings and voices in the wind. Mark, the engineer, tried to maintain order, but even he looked exhausted, with deep dark circles under his eyes and a restless gaze. "Mrs. Vance," he approached me one day, his voice lower than usual. Do you really believe these stories about the grove?" I just looked at him, and he seemed to understand the answer in my silence. David, who was once the most skeptical, began to have nightmares. He would wake up screaming in the middle of the night, sweating and terrified, describing visions of creeping shadows and red eyes in the forest. Sarah, in turn, developed a persistent cough that no doctor could diagnose, and her skin, once vibrant, acquired an unhealthy pallor. My daughter Susan, who had tried to mediate the situation, was now visibly shaken. "Mom, what's happening? This isn't normal. Maybe we should stop the construction." But David, despite his fear, still clung to his ambition. "We can't stop now. We've invested too much. It's just a phase. Stress." The phase reached its climax on a cold autumn afternoon. The excavation team, under pressure from David and Mark, had finally managed to unearth a large rock in the heart of the shadow grove, a landmark that, according to Alara's diary, marked the exact spot of the pact. The moment the rock was removed, a tremor shook the earth. It wasn't an earthquake, but something deeper, more visceral. A guttural sound, like an ancestral lament, erupted from the ground, making the surrounding trees sway violently. I was on the porch, watching. I saw the panic in David and Sarah's eyes, the terror on the faces of the workers. From the hole where the rock had been removed, a dark, foul-smelling mist began to rise, spreading rapidly through the forest. The air grew heavy, the smell of damp earth and something else, something ancient and putrid, filled my nostrils. Birds fled in a flurry, Wild animals ran in despair. David, pale and trembling, stumbled and fell to his knees. "Grandma!" he cried, his voice choked with fear. "What is this?" Sarah was in shock, her eyes fixed on the mist that was engulfing the grove. What was buried had finally been disturbed. And the abyss I had warned about, was not just a metaphor. It was a rift in reality, a door to something that great-grandmother Alara had sealed with a blood oath. The dark mist advanced, and with it, the promise of an ancient and relentless justice. They had mocked my wisdom, scorned my warnings. Now, the earth was collecting its price. In the days that followed, the Vance farm became a center of mystery and speculation. The doctors and psychologists who examined David and Sarah, and the few workers who hadn't fled in panic, found no logical explanation for their condition. It's severe post-traumatic shock, a rare form of dissociative amnesia, a collective nervous breakdown. The diagnoses varied, but none could capture the essence of what had happened. My grandchildren, once so full of life and ambition, were now like small children, needing constant care, with no memory of their projects, their careers, or even their own adult identities. David, the tech genius, spent his days building sandcastles in the garden, laughing with an innocence he had never possessed. Sarah, the fashion entrepreneur, drew flowers and butterflies in notebooks. Her creations, once so focused on trends and profit, were now pure expressions of an unburdened soul. They were no longer the grandchildren who called me outdated, but they were also not the grandchildren I had raised. They were new versions, stripped of their ambitions and greed, but also of their memories and their ability to function in the modern world. My daughter Susan, devastated, tried everything to reverse the situation. She took them to the best specialists, spent fortunes on experimental treatments, but nothing worked. She looked at me with a mixture of anger and despair. "Mom, you knew what was going to happen." I didn't deny it. "I warned you, Susan, but you wouldn't listen. The grove has its own rules," she cried, hugging her children who were now strangers. "But why, Mom? Why them?" And I answered, my voice laden with Ilara's wisdom. "Because they desecrated what was sacred. They sought easy wealth at the cost of history, the land, and respect. The grove doesn't kill the body, Susan. It reaps the soul, what makes us human. Their ambition, their greed, their ability to see beauty and truth." News of the incident in the Shadow Grove spread, but was quickly suppressed by Innovate Estates, which claimed a toxic gas leak and a series of workplace accidents. The project was abandoned, the land declared unsuitable for construction, and the company suffered a devastating financial blow. The Shadow Grove, now untouched, seemed to breathe a sigh of relief, its trees greener, the air purer. No one dared to approach the place anymore, and the legend of the mind-stealing mist spread through the surroundings, a new silent oath of respect. I, Eleanor, continued my life on the farm, taking care of Susan and my grandchildren, who were now like my children again, but in a different way. I taught them to plant, to care for animals, to appreciate the simple beauty of nature, things they had forgotten in their incessant pursuit of progress. They didn't remember their past lives, their ambitions, their cruel words. And, in a way, that was the Grove's justice. They were freed from the prison of their own greed, but at an immense cost. The ancestral secret had been revealed not with words, but with consequences. And Alara's legacy, the oath to protect what was buried, had been reaffirmed in an undeniable way. Years passed, and the Vance farm, once a stage of ambition and conflict, found a new peace. David and Sarah never recovered their memories or their former personalities. They lived simple, quiet lives, finding joy in small things, like the smell of damp earth or the song of birds. Susan, my daughter, although still carrying the pain of losing her children as she knew them, found solace in her new role as a caregiver and in rediscovering the values I had always tried to instill in her. She learned to respect the land, to listen to the whispers of the grove, and above all, to value the wisdom that comes with age. I, Eleanor, the outdated and old-fashioned one, continued to be the matriarch, but now with renewed respect. My voice, once ignored, was now listened to with attention, not out of fear, but out of a deep understanding of the truths I represented. The secret of the Shadow Grove was no longer just a legend. It was a living lesson, a constant reminder of the delicate balance between man and nature, between ambition and respect. Often, I would sit on the porch, watching David and Sarah play in the garden, their faces marked by a serenity that was once foreign to them. They had lost a lot, yes, but they had also gained something that money and progress could never buy: innocence, simplicity, and a genuine connection to the world around them. The grove's revenge was not cruel, but just. It removed what was corrupted, allowing a new form of life to flourish. My family's story, the story of the Shadow Grove, became a whispered tale in Vermont, a warning about the dangers of greed and the importance of honoring the past. I learned that true strength does not lie in controlling the future, but in respecting roots, in listening to the wisdom of ancestors, and in understanding that some truths are more powerful than any technology or fortune. And so, the Vance farm, with its Shadow Grove and its profound lessons, continued to exist, not as a monument to tragedy, but as a testament to resilience, redemption, and the justice that the earth itself can offer. May this story serve as a reminder to us all. What is buried does not always remain silent, and sometimes the greatest gift we can receive is the most painful lesson. If this story touched you, if it made you reflect on the value of wisdom and the price of greed, leave your comment below, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel for more stories that challenge the mind and touch the soul.